The first mental muscle that we're going to examine in this free introductory course to the Think and Grow Rich for Girls principle is our imagination. And this is one of my favorite chapters in the classic book Think and Grow Rich, which my upcoming book Think and Grow Rich for Girls is based on. Because it's such an interesting topic, and it is something that one of those mental muscles that we all use, and we have been ever since we were little kids. It's unbelievable how powerful our imaginations are for a number of different reasons. Now, I want to quote Einstein. Einstein said a couple things about the imagination. He said, our imagination is more important than knowledge. He said, knowledge is limited. He said, the imagination encircles the world. It's unlimited. He said, it's one of the most powerful forces in the world. And I agree with him. The reality is, whatever we can imagine up here, we can have down here. And that's so true. Our imaginations run wild. What's the other famous quote? Our imaginations, when we're young, run wild once in a while and hardly ever come back home. So let your imagination run wild. Now, how many times when you were growing up did you hear, stop daydreaming? Get your heads out of the clouds. Like, what are you thinking about? And unfortunately, that's the beginning of the time when our lid starts getting put on our imagination. When we're little kids, we imagine all kinds of things. If you're a little girl, I remember my sisters used to pretend they'd had tea with the Queen. My brother and I would go on space rides with the Apollo astronauts. We do all kinds of stuff. My kids, I have 3 kids. You see them, you put them in a corner, you give them something. Doesn't matter what. And they're in their own world. My daughters take their Barbies and they set up apartments. They've got the coolest penthouse apartments that you'd ever see in Chicago. And they play all afternoon because they're using their imagination. And unfortunately, sometime when you get to be around between 7 and about 12, our imagination starts to get shut down. And it's because people tell us, what are you daydreaming for? Stop daydreaming. Get your heads out of the clouds, right? I say daydream. I tell my kids daydream. I want you to imagine. Use your imagination. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have. I also want to let you in on another little idea. There's nothing in this universe that we can't imagine. And there's nothing in the universe that we can't think about. Because if we think about it and we have imagined it, it has to be in this universe. Likewise, there's nothing in the universe that we can't imagine, and nothing that we imagine can't be in the universe. Because our imagination is, by definition, ours, and we're in the universe. So therefore, anything that we can conceive within that imagination has to be in the universe. Now, it may not exist on the physical plane. Remember we talked about this, or no, we haven't talked about this yet. We'll talk about it in future lessons. We exist on 3 separate planes. The intellectual plane, up here, the physical plane, down here, and the spiritual plane, inside here, right? So just because a thought hasn't materialized on the physical plane doesn't mean it doesn't exist on the intellectual and the spiritual plane. Steve Jobs imagined the iPad, the iPhone, way before the technology, way before Wozniak could make the technology exist. The Wright brothers flew many, many times before they ever hit Kitty Hawk. Edison talked to Watson before Watson ever heard him say, come in here, I have something to tell you. The point is, all of these things existed in these people's imaginations. And your imagination is no different than yours. Than theirs. It's just as powerful. And when you understand this, like all the mental muscles we're going to talk about, when you know how to exercise that, just like exercising your biceps, they get stronger and you can use them for more things. You can lift more weight. Your imagination, your intuition, your perception, your memory, your reasoning, your will, all the mental muscles that we're talking about have the same capacity. When you acknowledge them and you understand how they work and you understand where they reside in the intellectual and the spiritual side of our being, and you know how to exercise these, which we'll show you in this course, you can use these mental tools to your advantage and in combination with each other to get whatever you want in this world. You'll move mountains. I'll quote, Gandhi. Gandhi's a perfect example. Gandhi imagined a free India. Gandhi used his will, his reasoning, his perception, his intuition. He got 200 million plus people to move in a direction. And he did this first in his imagination before he got one person to move. He did it in his imagination. So let your imagination run wild, right? Get emotionally attached to the things that you imagine, because those are the things that are going to move the most rapidly from the spiritual to the intellectual into the physical plane. When you bond your emotions and your feelings with your imagination, along with all the other mental muscles that we're talking about, and in my upcoming book, Think and Grow Rich for Girls, things move and accelerate at the speed of light. Your imagination is something you can start using right now. One of the other reasons I love teaching this particular lesson is you're an expert. You just may have forgotten that. Use your memory, one of your mental muscles, to remember how it was to imagine the world that you created, that you believed in, that was your reality, right? So you're already an expert. I don't need to show you how to do anything. You already know how to use your imagination because you did it when you were a kid. And you can do it again. Be a little kid again. Dream your dreams. What did Michelangelo say? He said, the sculptures contained within the rock. He says, I imagine the sculptor in the rock, and then I just remove everything else that doesn't belong. Who was the artist that said, I dream my painting, then I paint my dream? That's their imagination at work. Do you understand this? It's the workshop of your mind. Napoleon Hill said in his book, Think and Grow Rich, which my book, Think and Grow Rich for Girls, is based on, the imagination is the workshop of the mind. And your imagination can run wild, and it can serve you very, very well. So allow it to do that. I want you every day to close your eyes and imagine something in the past. And when you imagine the thing in the past, get in connection with the way you felt, the emotions that you're having, because that's what will drive it most rapidly. That's what will allow your other mental muscle, your memory, to open up, and you'll remember everything that was going on. Use your imagination today when you get out of bed to create the most amazing day. Today is the greatest day of your life in your imagination. You can make every day the greatest day of your life in your imagination, and then go out and live your imagination. In the future, create something in the future that solves a problem or makes you more comfortable or whatever it is. I imagine where I'm going to retire. I imagine where I'm going to open up a spiritual retreat. I have it all figured out in my imagination. If you ever sat down with me, I could tell you exactly what it looks like, how many rooms there are, which way it faces, because it's in my imagination. I don't have it yet, but I guarantee you that house exists. And if it doesn't, I'll design it and build it. The point is, use your imagination every day to go backwards, to create an incredible present, or to move forward. And that's what I encourage you to do in this particular lesson on exercising your mental muscles. Your imagination is the first muscle. Use it to your benefit.